is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for your time. I am Mike Sloan. I'm the founder and CEO of Simple Labs. We make a device called Cogni that is in the wine and spirit space. Before I get into some of the needs for Cogni in the market, I want to talk a little bit about myself. I grew up in bourbon country. I knew a lot about distilleries and distilling as a result of that. I lived right outside of Louisville, Kentucky. If you flash forward, I moved to wine country and I met a lot of winemakers and wineries out here where we're situated right now. And there's a couple of things that you notice about these guys is that one is they're very passionate about making great products. This is a love. It's not just a job. And the other is that they face a lot of serious and daunting challenges in the industry and something's badly needed to improve on the process that they're using. I want to talk about a few of those main challenges very briefly. In bourbon and whiskey, especially, angel share is a big problem. It costs them over $14 billion a year. It's a normal process to have evaporation. Angel share is the normal amount that'll evaporate out of a barrel over the course of 2 to 4 years. But when it's excessive and half the barrel's gone, it's a lot of product loss, and they're having a hard time struggling with, especially in the medium and their premium products, what to do. I'll get into it a little bit later here about a little more in depth on that one. But spoilage is another one in the wine industry. You get losses annually of about 7.6 billion to this. 1% of all wine barrels go bad. And it's only because they don't have enough labor. They don't have enough budget for sufficient quality testing. And so they lose barrels. And every time they lose a barrel here in Napa Valley, it's over $22,500 on average lost. Just in the product, 300 bottles of wine in one barrel. They spend tens of millions of dollars on these quality issues, and they're losing on a lot of fronts. There's a lot more challenges than just these, of course, but in general, a better solution that involves continuous barrel monitoring is needed. And that's where it comes in. I'll talk a little bit about this bourbon business case, for instance, because they don't track real-time parameters, their vital parameters. They're often mischoosing their mid and their premium product barrels, resulting in billions lost a year, like I'd mentioned. How does this happen? If you look at their current method, every day a big facility is putting at least 1,000 barrels in every single day of the year. They put them into the rick houses, they let them age 2 to 4 years, and at the end of a 2 to 4 year period, they don't know what's inside each of these barrels, so they will randomly drill into a small number of barrels, check them for their color, their flavor, and the alcohol content. And as long as they meet their standards for their recipe, those become their premium barrels. The problem is, again, because they don't know what's inside, they're frequently misselecting what their high-end barrels should be. With our method, it's the same idea. You put 1,000 or more in a day, but for every barrel it's covered with our devices, with Cogni, what Cogni does is it's tracking all those vital parameters. And you can see in the middle, like, of course, a barrel will start normal and full the first time it's in the first couple of days it's in the rick house. But over time, over that 2 to 4 year period, as you can see to the right, things are very different for every single barrel. And it has its own characteristics, its own wood, its own situation. These rick houses can be 7 stories tall, 70,000 barrels in one building. And so what we let them do, though, by tracking all that is say, hey, these are your candidates for your best stuff, your premium stuff, like some of these that are more full here. And then there's other ones that are going to be your mid-level things, the mid-level products. And then there's other ones where you might as well just start using that for your normal sort of run-of-the-mill products that you sell every day. Because of that, we're able to get them essentially optimize their premium productivity, their premium revenue. It's over 300% ROI compared to what they're doing now. It's a massive amount of ROI for them. And we've had several very large scale master distillers tell us they badly need this right now, both on the production side and on the company side, as far as their bottom line costs. So Cogni is what I've invented. It is a device of sorts, but it's not just a device. It's a platform that's using a lot of ML and AI behind it to power some insights, some alerts, some across any number of locations, doesn't matter. You can deploy as many of these devices as you want globally. And the data you get is a big deal because they've never had this kind of historical comparative data over time. And it allows for grouping and measurements, allows for a lot of the statistical information that is an incredibly valuable revenue stream in itself over time. So it's real-time visibility into this process. We have some very healthy immediate addressable markets. This year, we're launching in bourbon. That's nearly 4 billion in TAM for us. Later this year, we're launching in wine in California. That is nearly 1 billion in TAM as well. And you notice that these little blue areas you see are one or two counties where we don't have to service a very large geographic area. When we have a ground presence, for instance, in Kentucky, it's really just a couple of counties to service. Or here in Napa Valley, it's Napa and Sonoma County predominantly. It's a very small area to have to service. And then, of course, you see over to the right, we have nearly 6 billion in TAM there when we get over to EU wine. But that's not the whole story. You talk about platform extensibility. This can be applied to any spirit. So it's a $1.6 trillion global market value. We have been contacted by a number of conglomerates already. They want to know when we're going to be on the market. We are a very likely acquisition target for them because we're the only solution that can be applied to every single brand in their portfolio, whether it's a wine or a spirit. And this is likely our exit strategy, is that a conglomerate simply just acquires us. We have a number of patents. We just had another one filed, a provisional one filed this week. This is continually growing based on engineering's findings and new sort of novel ways that we're coming up with to expand the functionality of this device and the platform itself. We have no direct competition. There are people out there doing one or two things in either the wine space or one or two things in the bourbon space, but no one can do what we're doing across the board for the cost that we do it for. Net margins are healthy, 80% software, 30% hardware. We're looking at a 5 million ARR this year, scaling to about 29 million by year for 2027. Our traction, we have a lot of traction right now. We're going to be signing Heaven Hill and Jim Beam. That's nearly 4.9 million barrels just with those two alone. We're also signing potentially Uncle Nearest down in Tennessee. We're doing a collaborative study with the Beam Institute, which is the leading academic center for American bourbon. The Beam conference in March, we're presenting findings. We're going to have a very large presence there. And why are we so confident about this? Well, we've already ran betas and we've already ran tests on this device, actually both in wine and bourbon. And it's been functioning really well for now over a year in all these situations. So we feel confident these guys are going to convert to long-term partners for sure. The ask that we're in the middle of is a $10 million Series A to accelerate growth. We've had 3 different seed rounds, safe-based rounds. We've oversubscribed to every single one of those. And I put in $820,000 of my own money in the latest safe round. Excellent team, a lot of experts in wine and spirits in here, a lot of people who have done startups and Internet of Things type scaling of businesses, business operations, and business strategy. Over on the right, we have an excellent list of advisors on the wine and the bourbon side who know not just the production side of this and making great products, but also understand the chemistry and the science behind those products. And with that, I finished a little early, so I'll be glad to take any questions.
Great presentation, Mike. Vadim, what's your first question?
What is the nature of the device? How does it look physical form, and what does it do?
Yeah, so let me go back to the first slide. You can see it here. That's a good question. The device looks like this when it's fitted into a wine situation. It goes right into the barrel. It uses the same food grade materials that they use in winemaking right now. And then you can see over here with the bourbon one is actually put into the barrel right after the barrel is filled. With bourbon, it has to stay in there. So it's actually fitted with threads and a rubber O-ring, and it's airtight, watertight. And then you can see these batteries go on afterwards that are magnetic pogo pin type batteries that last multiple years. So that's the hardware side of it. And then, of course, like I mentioned, there's a pretty robust platform that's behind all of this, driving everything.
Nola, what's your first question?
A good description of how it works. Can you give me a little bit more color on the software And where does that sit inside of a winery or a distillery?
Yeah, let me get to my appendix real quick because I've got some good slides for that back here. So the platform itself, if you're looking at that, the platform allows for them to have, obviously it's a secure environment. People will have different types of profiles and permissions based on their role in the rick house or in the distillery. And then once they log in, they'll be able to see all of their locations just in across the planet, really, or in a geographic area that they're predominantly involved in. From that, they can drill down from lot level lists, which are group of barrels, down to even just a single device like this is showing for bourbon. And they're able to track and see anything that's within line. And if it's a normal, just nothing's going wrong, they're not going to get any alerts, of course, but they will get insights as to how the group is performing over time. But this platform sits in an AWS cloud environment. It's completely secure. At the same time, they can pull data when they want to for their data science teams from it. They can use it how they see fit. And then, of course, once we have the data on the higher level stuff, we'll anonymize that, aggregate that, and be able to present larger scale findings to everyone without being able to recognize them individually.
I can see where this is good for an overview, but does it give you an alert if something's gone wrong with your barrel? Or
Absolutely. Yes. So it's different for wine and spirits, but for instance, in wine, the winemaker can set tolerance ranges for pH or for acetic acid or for whatever parameter they feel they want to have a certain like SO2 as well. That they'll say, hey, if it's crossing this threshold, send me an alert. Or if it's about to cross a threshold or has a sudden delta over a few days, it'll know to send them an alert, send their cellar crew an alert that barrel should be looked at. The same with bourbon, but what the alerts in a bourbon are more around, hey, these barrels are performing better than others, because with bourbon, they're not able to necessarily mitigate anything in bourbon, but the bourbon goal is to tell them exactly which barrels are performing the best or which barrels are performing at a sort of normal rate and send them those insights over time. So with bourbon, it's more of an awareness of what's going on and trending over time. With wine, it's much more week to week, where they're getting parameters and getting insights much more frequently to that. But again, they're able to set this up the way they make their stuff particular to their brand and what they look for instance, in color or whatever it is. So they can personalize it exactly to what their facility, what their needs are as a distiller or a winemaker.
how much does it cost?
So it's cheap, actually. The beginning cost for these first people coming in is $50 a year, hardware and software included. So that's the first price. That's going to be for the first year. And then, of course, that's going to rise as we get the data offerings, as we get more insights. We also we'll have multi-year contracts. For bourbon, it's a 4-year contract. For wine, it's likely going to be a 1.5 to 2 year contract, but depending on what the kind of wine they're making. But for bourbon, it's definitely going to be a starting price of $50 per device per year. So in other words, over 4 years, it's $200. So if we save them even just a few bottles on average between those barrels that are covered, that's why we're getting that over 300% ROI over time.
Right. You are selling this direct now yourself? Or are you going to use, how's it going out to the customer?
So we're in the middle of our beta testing with customers. So we are building our trial devices to have our final testing for them. Once we get their blessing, then they become customers and they're ordering, somewhere between 70,000 to, we're going to cap it at about 100,000 max devices the first year. So we're able to give everybody a great customer experience the first year. But we are selling direct. We are going to have a ground presence, for instance, in Kentucky, a small scale facility that will house and have the inventory and have a tech team, guys in a van and things like that. But it's a direct sale. It's B2B sale, but it's a direct sale.
And is the product reusable if that barrel goes bad, or if you empty the barrel because you bottled it, can you reuse that device?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a lot of since it's a SaaS-based model and we still own the hardware, we'll bring in those those devices after X number of years, refurbish them, check the electronics inside, and then it's literally a canister that gets pulled out as the tube part of the device. And then we're able to send it right back out into the field because the steel itself is going to last a very long time. So, we'll get at least a decade out of that. So yeah, I mean, the margins obviously first year are much smaller, but then they grow substantially over time, especially because of that reusage.
It's a really important part.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Mike. Great questions, Noah, Vadim. Let's move on to our next presenter. We have with us today Barry Fella of Cranial Devices. Barry, if you could launch your slides and kick off when you're ready.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.